I just want to begin by thanking Reverend Howard for sharing the pulpit with me this Sunday. Usually when I'm speaking, he's not here. So this is the first time that I'm speaking and he's here, and I just really want to extend my gratitude to Reverend Howard for bringing to Unity of Houston a new minister 2.5 years ago, taking a chance on me, believing in me. I'm grateful for being here. I want to share with you something a little funny. NASA announced that over the course of the campaign season, they received a record number of applications for their astronaut training program, 18,000. And they were amazed, and I thought that this showed a renewed interest in space exploration. But the applicants said, nah, we just want to get off the planet before the election. So you may be joyful about what the election results were. You may be, upset about it. But let's remember that we're unity and that there's something greater that's emerging beyond appearances. And so we're here to be a healing presence. We're here to be the light, as Howard said. And so this is a time for making peace and for going forward in our country, doing our prayer work and knowing the truth. And so here we sing, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me, right? And we teach that we use our unity principles to first heal ourselves. And I believe that the greatest healing that we can do for ourselves is healing our belief in separation from God. In knowing our oneness with God, we can more fully realize a world where we experience oneness with each other and embody God in order to heal, to enlighten, and to create a world that works for all. And so in my time of prayer, I've been thinking about the election process, been looking for some metaphysical meaning, some deeper spiritual teaching. As a metaphysics teacher, that's what I'm apt to do. And I know that there are spiritual lessons everywhere, and I promise I'll refrain from politics, no political talk today. However, I wanted to use a concept from the campaign as a spiritual metaphor. This year, we experienced the historical nomination of a woman as a major party's candidate for president. And the symbol that was connected with this event was the idea of breaking a glass ceiling. And so I thought, where in my spirituality am I creating a glass ceiling that I need to break or to move past? I looked up the definition of glass ceiling, because I always want to know, how are we using words and what meaning are we giving to them? And so it was defined as an unofficially acknowledged barrier to advancement in a profession. And so I've been meditating on breaking a glass ceiling, and in that I was looking to Jesus' teachings and his form of teachings. And one of the ways that he taught was through parables. And so I thought I'd write a parable about it. I hope that, so would you like to hear it? Okay, I call it the parable of the glass ceiling. The kingdom of heaven is like a church with a large, clear glass ceiling where people come to worship the sun. They praised the sun for bringing them light. They sang songs to it, and they felt the sun's rays, and they felt warm and peaceful. And they believed that the sun was the source of everything. But the sun always seemed distant to them, and the people didn't really understand their relationship to it. They believed that maybe they better keep the sun happy or else it wouldn't show up anymore. And they experienced many sunny days. But one day, for the first time, it was cloudy, kind of like today. And they could no longer see the sun, and they tried to determine why. And so they felt cold. They weren't feeling the warmth. They felt cold. They were confused. They believed maybe the sun was punishing them for their behaviors and their actions and not making right choices. So they began arguing with each other about how they should act and how they turned the sun away. And then they started thinking it was different people's fault. So they were calling them, maybe they were cloud worshipers or moon worshipers, and this is what was causing the problems. And the church went through this season of many overcast days, and they fell into despair. And then one Sunday, the worship, the people of this church decided that the reason that the sun was hidden was because they had erected this glass ceiling that was separating them from the sun, so they decided that they needed to break it. And so they went up on the roof with their sledgehammers and were ready to crack open the glass ceiling. But the ministers knew that if they broke the glass ceiling of the church, that it would really destroy the church building, and it would raise their insurance premiums. And so they thought, we've got to stop this. This is a bad idea. And so they convinced the people on the roof to come on down, and that they would try another way. And so one of the ministers decided that they would lead the people in a meditation. And so they asked the people to turn within and to begin to imagine that the light of the sun was within them. And the people focused on the qualities that they had attributed to the sun, the warmth, the love, the peace, the light. And they recognized that those qualities were available within them. And they awakened to the awareness that the sun had never really left them. And they began to call themselves one with the sun. And the more that they related to the sun this way, the more they came into a deeper understanding of themselves as the light. And they wanted so much to know their oneness with the light that they began exclaiming, "I am the light, I am the light." And so when they came out of the meditation, they opened their eyes, they began to see the light in each other. They began to see what they only saw in the sun. And they felt that same joy and that warmth and that peace and that love. And finally, they realized that there really was no glass ceiling separating the church from the sun, because the true light was the light that shined from within themselves. And they began to build a community of light amongst each other. And so like the sun always does, it did come back again, and it shined on them. But the world was even brighter now because the people of the earth were shining. And so perhaps the meaning of this parable is more obvious than some of Jesus' more obscure ones that I'm still trying to figure out. I hope it was obvious to you. In Unity, we teach that we're one with God, but what does that really mean? I think it's important to first understand that when we're talking about God, we're talking about the spiritual universe behind the physical universe. We're talking about metaphysics, which the word breaks down to meta, meaning beyond, and physics, the study of the physical. So that which is beyond the physical. Thank you, God. And so when we're talking about God in unity, we're talking about, okay, you hear me? Oh, is this, you here now? Okay, we're talking about God as the absolute realm of all divine ideas and potentiality that is the basis and is used to manifest the physical universe. And we're creating our world through our use of divine ideas. And why are they not showing up maybe sometimes as divine as we'd like them to be? Because we're using them at the level of our consciousness. And so when we ask questions about life, like, how did God let this happen? We're falling back to an embedded theology that believes that God alone controls our universe and our experience, and we can tend to attribute human qualities to God, like a personality that judges and is in anger and causes negative things to happen to us for some kind of a reason. In Unity, we have this wonderful teaching that is the 4 basic levels of consciousness. I found it really helpful for me to see where I'm at and where I can move to, and I hope that it blesses you today as I share it with you. Now, at any given time, we can be experiencing these levels, moving through these levels, but they can experience them as states of consciousness or stages. So stage is where you're kind of hanging out in that level for a while, maybe. So you can really know it and really master it. And we know that through intention, through willingness, through faith, you can shift your consciousness, okay? And so the lowest level which there are 4 V's, and the lowest one is victim consciousness. I think we all know victim consciousness. Most people in our world seem to express it in a lot of ways, in that woe is me, poor me. It's like, you know, that person who has the victim story when their caller ID comes up and you go, oh, do I answer it? I don't know. I know it's on the other end, you know, and then it could be you. You know, so I've been there, you know, hey, maybe I was there this morning, but it's that belief that everything is happening to me, like that I don't have any control in my life, that life is against me, and it's not a far stretch to believe that God is against you and that God's trying to teach you a lesson, or that you're trying to work through some really bad karma. And I know when I'm at this level of consciousness that I'm below the level of truth, that I'm not knowing my spiritual principles, I'm not living and expressing them, and that I don't need to be believing that kind of talk, that negative talk that's going on in my mind. And so when you're at this stage of consciousness, you're putting the locus of control of your life outside of you, and it can be very unhealthy to believe that you have little or no control of your life. But to believe that God is against you is to give God some kind of a human personality. And we say that we're one with God, but how often do we give God attributes that are human? We say we put it in God's hands, we're in the arms of God, we call God a he, we point to God in the sky as if God was only in one location and not here. The first chapter of Genesis says we are created in the image and the likeness of God. And so in our human experience, we're so focused on sense consciousness and that which is outside of ourselves. The conception that we create through a victim consciousness is just some kind of Superman, somebody who is, more physical, expressing that, human attributes rather than what we know of the divine as the absolute realm of all potentiality and all divine ideas. Myrtle Fillmore talked about this. She's our Unity co-founder, and she said, we're studying spiritual science to get a broader conception of God, rather than holding the view that he is a personal being with parts like a man, a being subject to change and capable of varying moods. Though personal to each of us, God is it, neither male nor female, but principle. God is not cold, senseless principle like the principle of mathematics, but the principles of life and love and intelligence. And so now I understand that the tendency to stay in the victim consciousness because it's comfortable there, right? To complain and just be, it maybe is the way that you or, your people around you know to be. But, and we don't have to take responsibility of our actions if we believe we have no control. And that might be where your glass ceiling is. Right? So we know that, but we know that there's something beyond that if we want our lives to work and to express the good of God. And so the next level is what's called victor consciousness. I'm not a victim, I'm a victor. I'm an overcomer. I see myself as being touched by God's goodness and grace. If I stay in faith, God will see me through. And there's a certain amount of control that I understand that life is being controlled by me at some level, maybe through my prayers, and my own innate power of mind is now activated at this level. Now, however, if you're seeing yourself as a victor and not a victim, it's kind of a cycle, because there's always if there's a victor, there always has to be a victim, right? It's just, and then in the idea of overcoming something, we can tend to create what might be called an enemy, some kind of opposing energy that we're here to overcome. But in Unity, we don't believe that there's any power working against you except a power that you've given to a false belief in your mind. And we are very powerful creators, and we can really create a world that is, not true, and live in that and create our own kind of experience of hell. But the level of victor consciousness can be a huge leap in consciousness for you if you've kind of been stuck in victim consciousness. And so it can feel very empowered. But notice that the God view here in victor consciousness is still separate from you. You're still kind of negotiating with God and praying to a God that's separate from you, believing that God's kind of at work behind the scenes. But it could be enough for you. And That could be your glass ceiling, that victor consciousness. But there are 2 more levels to go. Do you want to hear about the other levels? Right? We want to get beyond victor and what's up higher. And so the next level, so we've got victim, victor, and then we've got vessel consciousness. So that's the belief that God is working through me, as me, that I'm like the prayer of St. Francis, make me a channel of your peace, make me an instrument of your peace, right? And so we're realizing that there's something greater and that is at work in my consciousness. It is in me. Now, in vessel consciousness, you may be believing that God is showing up as you, but God's not really you. It's kind of showing up and you've got this duality still happening. It's like you go to a Halloween party as a ghost, but you're not really the ghost. You're pretending to be the ghost, or you're never truly that ghost. That's what you're imagining yourself to be, right? So Charles Fillmore talked about vessel consciousness, and he said, man constitutes the instrument of God through which each person brings his potentialities into visibility. Man is the vessel of God and expresses God. And so believe it or not, that is a very high level of consciousness, that vessel consciousness. But there is a level beyond that level, but that may be where your imaginary glass ceiling, wow, if I really felt the presence of God moving in and through me, that would really be the highest that maybe I can go in my life. But there's that other level, and so I want to share it with you, that it really requires your willingness and your faith, because it's something that in our Christian culture, we've been told is only attainable by one person. And this is called verity consciousness. And it's the belief that God is me. God is me. So we've been kind of conditioned to believe, not here, but in traditional Christianity, that was only Jesus. And this occurs when I finally come to realize oneness, which is what we're about here in unity. This is when I realize there's no such thing as God or divine mind and me. I realize that it is me. So this can be a big leap in consciousness to get there, to that realization. Charles Fillmore explained that the personal man Jesus is merely the veil or the mask worn by the spiritual man Christ or Jehovah. We're all in our personality wearing the mask that conceals the real, the spiritual, the I am, this Christ consciousness. He said, it's your mission to express all that you can imagine God to be. Let this be your standard of achievement and never lower it, nor allow yourself to be belittled by the cry of sacrilege. Sacrilege, oh my gosh, I'm calling myself the Christ. You can attain to everything you can imagine. If you can imagine that it is possible to God, it is also possible to you. So Jesus was demonstrating, we believe Jesus was demonstrating this oneness consciousness that was not just to say he could do it, that we all could, that we could do what he could do and greater things, he said. And so the divine is what you are. And so you might be wondering, well, how do I get there from here? If I'm like, wait, that victim consciousness sounds a lot like where I've been at lately. Okay, that seems like a big leap. Well, you know you've been creating your life through the power of your word. And that's what we teach here. That's why we use affirmations to raise our consciousness to that consciousness of truth and oneness. That's our practice. And so I invite you to join with me in a couple of affirmations that we've been doing in my advanced metaphysics class. So you get to be advanced today. I hope you will join me in knowing this verity consciousness affirmation. I am Christ, I am divine. Let's say it together. I am Christ, I am divine. Again, I am Christ, I am divine. One more time. I am Christ, I am divine. Take a deep breath. Let go. And just notice if any resistance came up when you said that, because that word, Christ, that we've attributed to maybe a person, but that really represents a consciousness, the anointed one, that divine nature, which is the very truth of who we are. Charles Fillmore said, metaphysicians have discovered that man can greatly accelerate the growth of himself, of the Christ mind, by using affirmations to identify himself with the Christ. These affirmations often are so far beyond the present attainment of the novice as to seem ridiculous, but when it's understood that the statements are grouped about an ideal to be attained, they seem fair and reasonable. And so this is my second year of teaching metaphysics classes. I'm kind of teaching them over and over, and I'm really getting to the heart of what our unity teachings are, which is realizing this Christ consciousness. And what the Fillmores did was they affirmed their Christ consciousness. They claimed it. They didn't say, I hope to experience Christ consciousness one day. They said, I am the Christ, I am divine. And they used affirmations to bring that consciousness forward, and they did a great healing work. And their work continues because it's of a powerful nature. And so when I first started affirming I am Christ, that felt really weird to me. It was not until I got to Unity Village, and it was over 7 years ago, and it took a while for me to really get comfortable with it, because I had a lot of embedded theology, a lot of thoughts around what that word meant, and a sense of not being worthy of attaining that level of consciousness. And so I wanted to share with you a poem that I wrote at that time, which when I had just started really to understand my own Christ nature and just how it had changed me and my life for good. And it was just published in a booklet, a uni booklet called You Are Enough. And it's deeply personal, but I thought it was necessary. I wanted to share it from my heart. Thanks. You haven't heard it yet. Just kidding. All right, here it is. It's called I Am More Than. I once saw God as a man, and I felt less than. I learned of Jesus the man, and I felt less than. I looked in the great book, written by men, edited by men, translated by men, controlled by men, and I felt less than. In the scheme of things, as a petite young woman, I felt small. I felt I was the smallest of all. I couldn't grow in the church of glittery things. I couldn't grow in the church of punishing things. I couldn't grow in the church of separating things. Then I found a place where people sat in the dark and a bright light shone on me. And I found my joy as I danced and my light grew. And I found my joy as I sang and my light grew. And I found my joy as I was acting and my light grew. And people could see this light and they called it good. And I took the light home with me and I didn't know what it was. So I had to protect it. And I protected it and protected it and protected it until it really didn't come out much anymore. And I felt small. And I got sick. Oh, I was sick. And the sickness stopped me from singing. The sickness stopped me from dancing. The sickness stopped me from acting. And I went from teacher to see if they could see that light. And I was told that I had to try harder. And all I tried wasn't enough. But the light danced, and inside it sang, and inside it shone like a star. Then when I was as small as I could be, I found unity. And little by little, the principles soaked in, and there was a spark. And I knew that I didn't have to protect the light anymore because it couldn't be put out. And I learned that God is not a man, and I felt more than. I learned that the Christ is not a man, and I felt more than. I learned that that great book was there to tell me that I am more than. And the healing began, and the light grew, but this time, people didn't have to sit in the dark to see it. And I learned to be the real me, which is more than man or woman. It is, I am. Thank you very much. So I believe that if we're not believing and claiming that Christ consciousness is our consciousness, it's generally due to a belief that we're not worthy of it, that we've been carrying around this unworthiness, and it's kind of created a glass ceiling that is limiting our spiritual growth. But know that that glass ceiling is of your own creation. It's not real. You can let that go and be open to oneness when you stand in faith and a willingness to know that truth, and you set an intention, and you are mindful of your consciousness and what you're thinking and what you're creating through the power of your word. And so I invite you, in the awareness of these levels of consciousness, that if you're wanting to know greater consciousness in your life, to keep coming to Unity, keep being a part of our services and our classes, and know that we are a place where we value oneness, transformation, and these spiritual principles and community. And I envision us being a great beacon of light in our world, a beacon of healing, of coming together, of harmony, and of oneness. Thank you for being here today, and bless you.